Here's the beginning of the translation, with Americanized names and locations. The siren cut through the silence of the early morning as Sarah Thompson adjusted her bulletproof vest. Her brown eyes reflected the determination of her 10 years of service in the New York Police Department. In the passenger seat of the patrol car, her partner Rachel was furiously typing on the mobile terminal, receiving the latest updates on the location of the group of robbers who had just attacked an armored truck. 3 suspects in a silver Chevrolet heading towards the East River Parkway, Rachel informed, her fingers nervously tapping on the dashboard. Central confirms they're armed. Sarah accelerated, her thoughts momentarily turning to Luna, her Siamese cat that she had rescued during an incident 5 years ago. It was always like this before risky operations. She thought of her feline companion like a protective talisman. "Can you see the license plate?" Sarah asked, skillfully maneuvering between the cars, making way for the patrol car. "Partial? Starts with ABC," Rachel replied, holding on as Sarah made a sharp turn. "Tactical teams are on their way, but we're the closest." The radio crackled with constant updates. Other patrol cars were converging on the area, trying to create a strategic blockade. Sarah knew these streets like the back of her hand. She had grown up here, played on these sidewalks, dreamed of the day she would wear the uniform to protect her community. "There," Rachel pointed. The silver Chevrolet appeared ahead, weaving dangerously between vehicles. Sarah felt the familiar adrenaline course through her body. This was her specialty, vehicular pursuits. It wasn't for nothing that her colleagues called her Panther, both for her feline precision behind the wheel and for her special connection with Luna. "Central Unit 2547 in pursuit. East River Parkway heading north," Sarah informed, keeping her voice calm despite the tension of the moment. The Chevrolet tried to lose them by entering an access ramp, but Sarah anticipated the maneuver. Years of experience had given her a sixth sense for predicting the actions of fugitives. The distance between the vehicles was gradually decreasing. "They're going to try to enter the industrial complex," Sarah muttered, more to herself than to Rachel. "So it's the only place with escape routes in this area." As predicted, the Chevrolet made a sharp turn towards a set of abandoned warehouses. Sarah maintained the pursuit, aware that the situation was about to get complicated. The uneven terrain and narrow alleys between the warehouses created a dangerous labyrinth. "Back up in 3 minutes," Rachel informed, checking the GPS. "Helicopter taking off." Sarah reduced speed as they entered the complex. The headlights bounced off the peeling walls of the warehouses, creating eerie shadows. The Chevrolet had disappeared into one of the alleys, but the sound of its engine still echoed between the structures. "They know the place," Sarah observed, her eyes scanning each alley, each corner. "This wasn't chosen at random." Rachel nodded, her hand resting on her holster. "We need to be careful. It could be a—" Before she could finish her sentence, the Chevrolet suddenly appeared from the side, forcing Sarah to make an abrupt maneuver. The patrol car skidded, but she maintained control, immediately resuming the pursuit. "They're trying to corner us," Sarah concluded, noticing the pattern of movement of the suspects. "Rachel, activate Protocol Sigma. We need all exits blocked." The industrial complex transformed into an arena of cat and mouse. Sarah kept the pressure on the fugitives, forcing them to make mistakes, while Rachel coordinated with the approaching support teams. The full moon partially illuminated the scene, creating a play of light and shadow that made each movement more dramatic. Sarah felt that something was different about this pursuit. There was a precision to the suspects' maneuvers that suggested preparation, as if each turn, each decision, was part of a larger plan. "Sarah, they're leading us to Sector C," Rachel warned, consulting the complex's layout on her tablet. "It's a dead end." "No," Sarah replied, her voice laden with certainty. "It's exactly where they want to go." The patrol car rounded another warehouse, and Sarah saw something that confirmed her suspicions. Fresh tire marks on the ground, indicating that this route had been rehearsed previously. "Central, suspicion of ambush in Sector C," she reported, keeping calm. "Request cautious approach from support units." The Chevrolet slowed down as it entered a large yard, surrounded by 3 abandoned warehouses. Sarah stopped the patrol car at a safe distance, keeping the high beams on. The moment of confrontation was approaching, and she could feel every muscle in her body tense, prepared for what was to come. Whatever they've planned, Sarah said, checking her equipment, it's not going to work. At that moment, as if responding to a silent call, Luna, at home, raised her pointed ears and fixed her blue eyes in the direction of the city, as if she could sense that her human was about to face the greatest challenge of her career. The night air carried a palpable tension as Sarah and Rachel maintained their position, observing the silver Chevrolet parked a few meters away. The patrol car's headlights partially illuminated the scene, creating an impromptu stage in that abandoned industrial yard. "Something's not right," Sarah whispered, noticing movements in the shadows of the warehouses. Her years of experience screamed warnings in her mind. "Rachel, keep in touch with backup. How long?" 2 minutes for the first units," her partner replied, not taking her eyes off the perimeter. Suddenly, the doors of the Chevrolet opened simultaneously. 3 figures emerged with their hands raised, apparently surrendering. Sarah narrowed her eyes, her keen intuition detecting the falseness of that gesture. "NYPD, keep your hands where we can see them," Sarah shouted, her firm voice echoing across the yard. The leader of the group, a tall man wearing a dark jacket, stepped forward. "Officer Thompson," he pronounced her name with a disturbing familiarity. "Your reputation precedes you." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. How did he know her name? Her initial suspicions were confirmed. This wasn't a simple chase, it was a meticulously planned trap. "Full identification, now," Sarah ordered, maintaining her composure despite the surprise. The man laughed, a sound that seemed out of place in the tension of the moment. "I believe we've already met, Sarah. Or rather, we should have. After all, it was you who destroyed my brother's plans 5 years ago." Sarah's mind worked quickly, connecting the dots. 5 years ago, she had led an operation that resulted in the arrest of a gang specializing in armored truck robberies. It was during that same operation that she found Luna, then a frightened kitten hidden among boxes. "Richard Dawson," Sarah murmured, recognizing the resemblance to the man she had arrested years before. "I see your memory doesn't fail," Richard smiled, taking another step forward. "You know, I spent a long time planning this moment, studying your patterns, your roots, your life." Rachel was already in silent communication with the support teams, transmitting the critical situation that was developing. Sarah kept her focus on Richard, aware that every second was crucial. "Your brother made his choices," Sarah responded firmly, "and you're about to make the same mistake." "Mistake?" Richard laughed again. "The only mistake was underestimating how much I learned by watching you, Officer Thompson. Every detail, every move." He made a wide gesture with his hands, and Sarah noticed movement in the shadows of the warehouses. They weren't alone. There were more people hidden, probably armed, ready for a confrontation. The trap was complete. "Central, critical situation in Sector C," Rachel transmitted discreetly. "Multiple suspects identified. Immediate backup needed." Sarah maintained her position, her mind working through various possibilities for action. Training and experience told her to wait for reinforcements, but her instinct warned that Richard wouldn't wait that long. "You know what's ironic?" Richard continued, his voice taking on a darker tone. "You destroyed my family thinking you were doing justice. Now I'm going to show you what it means to lose everything you've built." The sound of footsteps echoed across the yard as more figures emerged from the shadows. Sarah and Rachel found themselves surrounded by at least 10 people, all in strategic positions. "Last chance," Sarah warned, her voice not betraying the turmoil of emotions she felt. "Surrender now, and no one gets hurt." Richard shook his head as if disappointed. "Always the negotiator, aren't you? But tonight isn't about negotiation, Sarah. It's about settling scores." The air seemed to grow thicker, charged with the imminence of confrontation. Sarah could hear the sirens of the backup units in the distance, but she knew they would still take precious minutes to arrive. At home, Luna was restless, her feline instincts picking up something that transcended physical distance. The Siamese cat paced back and forth, her blue eyes fixed in the direction of the city, as if she could sense the danger her human was facing. Back in the industrial yard, Sarah made a subtle movement, positioning herself better behind the patrol car door. Her years of experience told her that the next moments would be decisive. "Richard," she tried one last time, "don't turn this into something you'll regret." His smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of cold determination. The regret, Sarah, will be all yours. Time seemed to freeze for an instant, as if the universe itself was holding its breath before the storm that was about to unleash in that abandoned industrial yard. Chaos erupted in a matter of seconds. The first shot came from the left, ricocheting off the patrol car's body. Sarah and Rachel sought immediate cover, their movements synchronized by years of partnership. "Back up in 1 minute," Rachel shouted while responding to the attack with controlled precision. Sarah kept her eyes on Richard, who had strategically retreated behind a concrete column. The deafening sound of gunfire echoed between the warehouse walls, creating a chaotic symphony of metal and concrete. "We need to buy time," Sarah yelled to her partner, realizing they were outnumbered. Years of training and field experience guided Sarah's every move. She visualized the yard like a chessboard, calculating positions, anticipating movements. Her heart was pounding, but her hands remained steady. "Central. Officers under heavy attack in the industrial complex," Rachel transmitted, her voice maintaining professional calm even under pressure. Sarah took advantage of a pause in the gunfire to change position, moving like a shadow between available covers. Her trained eyes captured every detail, the positions of the shooters, escape routes, possible traps. "You can't escape this time, Sarah," Richard's voice echoed across the yard. "This is just the beginning." A new coordinated attack forced the officers to separate. Sarah rolled behind an abandoned container, feeling the metal vibrate with the impacts of the projectiles. Her mind remained clear, focused, even as the danger increased with each second. At home, Luna had positioned herself by the window, her blue eyes fixed on the city skyline. The cat's fur was bristled, and small meows of distress escaped her throat, as if she could feel the battle her owner was facing. Back in the yard, Sarah noticed a change in the attackers' strategy. They were moving in a circular pattern, trying to close the trap. The sirens of the backup unit sounded closer and closer, but still not close enough. "Rachel, watch your right flank," Sarah warned, noticing a suspicious movement in the shadows. The warning came just in time. Rachel managed to avoid an ambush, responding with surgical precision. Her partnership with Sarah went beyond words. They were like sisters in combat, anticipating each other's needs. "Sarah," Richard's voice sounded closer, "did you really think you could simply destroy my family and move on? That you could play hero without consequences?" Sarah's response came in the form of a precise tactical maneuver. She moved quickly between covers, forcing the shooters to reveal their positions. Each movement was calculated, each decision based on years of experience. The sound of the police helicopter cut through the night air, its powerful spotlights beginning to sweep the area. Sarah knew she needed to keep Richard and his group occupied for a few more minutes, until the encirclement was complete. "Your brother chose his path, Richard," Sarah responded, her voice firm despite the situation. "And you're repeating the same mistakes." A bitter laugh echoed across the yard. "Mistakes? The only mistake was trusting the system you represent. But today everything changes." Sarah noticed a change in his tone of voice. There was something more there, something beyond revenge. Richard wasn't just trying to settle scores, he had a bigger plan. The confrontation intensified. Gunshots crossed the air like lethal lightning, ricocheting off metal structures and concrete walls. Sarah and Rachel maintained their positions, responding with discipline and precision, aware that every movement could be decisive. "Tactical teams are entering from the south side," Rachel informed, her voice barely audible over the chaos. Sarah nodded, understanding that the crucial moment was approaching. Richard and his group would be pressured, and desperate people make mistakes. She needed to be ready for any possibility. The helicopter was making increasingly lower circles, its beams of light cutting through the darkness like luminous swords. Shadows danced across the yard, creating a surreal scenario of light and darkness. "It's over, Richard," Sarah shouted, realizing that the encirclement was almost complete. "There's no way out." The response came in the form of a sudden movement. Richard emerged from his cover, his eyes shining with a disturbing determination. "You're wrong, Sarah. This is just the beginning." Time seemed to slow down as Sarah processed the scene in front of her. Her training, her experience, all her instincts screamed that something was about to change drastically. The air seemed charged with electricity, like moments before a devastating storm. At home, Luna let out a long, anguished meow, as if sensing that her beloved human was about to face the most critical moment of her life. Sarah Thompson's fate was about to take an unexpected turn, and not even her years of experience could have prepared her for what was to come. The world around Sarah Thompson exploded into chaos. Richard, with a quick and precise movement, launched an object in her direction. Her years of training made her react instinctively, throwing herself to the side, but not fast enough. A deafening explosion shook the yard. Sarah felt the impact before hearing the sound, an invisible force that hurled her against a concrete wall. For a moment, everything went silent, as if the world had been swallowed by a vacuum. As her senses began to return, Sarah found herself enveloped in a cloud of dust and smoke. The metallic taste of blood in her mouth and the sharp pain in her torso indicated that she had been hit. She tried to move, but her body wasn't responding as it should. "Rachel!" she shouted, her voice hoarse and weak. There was no response. Through the haze of pain and confusion, Sarah heard footsteps approaching. Richard's figure emerged from the smoke, a smile of triumph on his face. "Look how the tables have turned, Officer Thompson," he said, his voice mixing satisfaction and contempt. "You took everything from me, and now it's my turn to return the favor." Sarah tried to reach for her weapon, but her movements were slow, imprecise. Richard observed with an air of morbid amusement. "Don't worry," he continued, crouching beside her. "I don't intend to take your life. That would be too merciful. I want you to live, Sarah. Live to see everything you've built crumble." The sound of sirens and helicopters grew with each passing second. Richard looked around, aware that his time was running out. "This is just the beginning," he whispered, leaning in closer. "When you wake up, if you wake up, the world you know will no longer exist, and you'll know it was all your fault." With a quick movement, he delivered a precise blow to Sarah's temple. Darkness enveloped her instantly, the last images in her mind being Luna's face and the distant echo of Rachel's voice. The constant beep of cardiac monitors was the first sound Sarah registered as she returned to consciousness. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft light of the hospital room. The pain in her body was a constant reminder of the events at the industrial complex. "Welcome back, Officer Thompson," a gentle voice greeted her. A middle-aged nurse smiled at her, adjusting the IV. "You gave us quite a scare." Sarah tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. The nurse offered her a cup of water, helping her drink slowly. "How long?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice hoarse and weak. 3 days, the nurse replied. "You were in an induced coma due to your injuries. The doctor will be happy to know you're awake. I'll call him immediately." As the nurse left, Sarah tried to organize her thoughts. The memories of the night of the confrontation were fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit together. Dr. Wilson, a man with a serious and compassionate appearance, entered the room minutes later. "Officer Thompson, it's good to see you awake. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," Sarah replied, attempting a weak smile. The doctor nodded understandingly. "Considering what you've been through, that's a pretty accurate description. You suffered multiple injuries, including a head trauma and fractured ribs, but you're strong and we're optimistic about your recovery." Sarah hesitated before asking the question she feared most. "And my partner, Rachel?" Dr. Wilson paused, his face assuming a grave expression. "Officer Davis was also severely injured. She's in intensive care but stable. The next few days will be crucial." A knot formed in Sarah's throat. Rachel, her friend, her sister-in-arms, fighting for her life because of a trap that was meant for her. "And the suspects?" she asked, trying to maintain her composure. "I'm sorry, but I don't have that information," the doctor replied. "I'm sure your superiors will come to speak with you as soon as they know you're awake. For now, I need you to rest and focus on your recovery." Sarah nodded, although her mind was far from at ease. Richard's last words echoed in her memory, a sinister promise that the worst was yet to come. As Dr. Wilson made notes on his clipboard, Sarah noticed something unusual in the corner of the room. A small arrangement of wildflowers, so out of place in that sterile environment, caught her attention. "Those flowers?" she began to ask. The doctor followed her gaze and smiled. "Ah, yes. Your cat brought them." Sarah blinked, confused. "My cat?" "Yes, the Siamese," he explained, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She showed up at the hospital the day after your admission, carrying those flowers. The nurses were fascinated. She's been visiting every day since then." Sarah's mind was spinning with this information. Luna, her faithful companion, had somehow found her way to the hospital. It was impossible, illogical, and yet comforting. "Will she come again today?" Sarah asked, suddenly feeling a need for her feline friend's presence. Dr. Wilson smiled gently. "I'm sure she will. It seems she has a sixth sense when it comes to you." As the doctor left the room, Sarah closed her eyes, finally letting the tears fall. The weight of the events, the concern for Rachel, and the uncertainty of the future overwhelmed her. But amid all this darkness, the idea of Luna finding her way to her shone like a beacon of hope. Sarah didn't know what the future held, what challenges Richard had prepared or how she would face it all. But at that moment, all she wanted was to see her little furry friend, feel the comfort of her presence, and find strength for the battle to come. Outside the hospital, Luna sat patiently, her blue eyes fixed on the window of Sarah's room, as if she knew her human had finally awakened and was waiting for her. The sunset painted the Los Angeles sky with shades of orange and pink as Luna, Sarah's Siamese cat, silently slipped through the hospital corridor. Her blue eyes, alert and determined, seemed to know exactly the way to her owner's room. The nurses and security guards, already accustomed to the unusual feline presence, just smiled and shook their heads in admiration. Sarah, still weak and in pain, heard the soft sound of paws approaching. Her heart filled with an inexplicable emotion when she saw Luna enter the room, delicately carrying a small wildflower in her mouth. "Luna," Sarah whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "How did you find me, my little one?" The cat gracefully jumped onto the bed, leaving the flower next to Sarah's pillow before carefully snuggling against her owner's chest. Luna's soft purr was like a balm for the wounded officer's soul. "You're amazing, you know that," Sarah murmured, stroking her companion's soft fur. "I don't know how you did this, but I'm so happy you're here." At that moment, Dr. Wilson entered the room, surprised to see the scene. "Well, it looks like we have a very special visitor," he commented, smiling. "You know, Sarah, in all my years of medicine, I've never seen anything like this. This cat has been showing up every day, always at the same time, always with a flower. It's almost as if she knew." Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of comfort and strength emanating from Luna. "She knows, Doctor. Somehow she always knows." The doctor nodded, respecting the special bond between the patient and her pet. "Well, I have good news for you. Your tests are showing significant improvement. If this continues, we may be able to transfer you to a regular room soon." "And Rachel?" Sarah asked, the concern evident in her voice. Dr. Wilson hesitated for a moment before answering. "Officer Davis is still in critical condition but stable. She's a fighter, just like you." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the information. Luna, sensing her owner's distress, moved closer, as if to protect her. "Thank you, Doctor," Sarah said finally. Is there any more news about what happened that night?" The doctor shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I don't have information about the investigation. Your superiors mentioned they would come to talk to you as soon as you were in condition." After Dr. Wilson left, Sarah was alone with her thoughts and Luna. Richard's words echoed in her mind. "When you wake up, if you wake up, the world you know will no longer exist." "What did he mean by that, Luna?" Sarah murmured, more to herself than to the cat. "What's happening out there?" As if in response, Luna got up and walked to the small television in the corner of the room. She meowed insistently, looking from the TV to Sarah. Intrigued, Sarah picked up the remote control and turned on the device. The news that filled the screen left her stunned. "In a shocking development in the case of the explosion at the industrial complex," said the reporter, "new evidence suggests possible involvement of police officers with the criminal group. Anonymous sources claim that compromising documents were found, casting doubt on the integrity of some members of the department." Sarah felt the blood freeze in her veins. The pieces were starting to fit together. Richard's plan was much bigger than simple personal revenge. He was trying to discredit the entire institution, and somehow she was at the center of it all. "Luna," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly, "we need to find out what's really going on." And we need to do it fast. The cat looked at her owner with an almost human intensity, as if she perfectly understood the gravity of the situation. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Captain Thompson, Sarah's direct superior, entered the room. His usually impassive face showed signs of concern and fatigue. "Mendez," he greeted, noting with surprise Luna's presence. "I see you have company." "Captain," Sarah responded, trying to sit up straighter in bed. "Oh, what's happening out there? The news?" Thompson raised his hand, interrupting her. "The situation is complicated, Mendez. Very complicated. Someone is playing a very dangerous game, and unfortunately, you and Davis are in the middle of it." He pulled up a chair and sat down next to the bed, his gaze alternating between Sarah and Luna, who watched him attentively. "Listen carefully, Sarah," the captain began, his voice low and serious. "What I'm about to tell you can't leave this room. The truth is that we're dealing with a conspiracy much bigger than we initially imagined." As Captain Thompson began to reveal the dark details of the situation, Luna positioned herself protectively next to Sarah. The officer knew that, regardless of the challenges to come, she would not be alone in this battle. With Luna by her side, and determination burning in her chest, Sarah prepared to face the biggest fight of her life, a fight for truth, justice, and everything she believed in. Captain Thompson spoke in a low voice, his eyes constantly checking the door of the room as if he feared being overheard. Sarah listened attentively, feeling the weight of each word. "The attack at the industrial complex was just the tip of the iceberg, Mendez," Thompson began. "Richard Carter is not just a criminal seeking revenge. He's part of a much larger organization, with deep roots in various institutions in the city." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of organization, Captain?" Thompson sighed heavily. "One that mixes organized crime with political and business corruption. They have infiltrators everywhere, in the police, in the judiciary, even in the mayor's office. Their goal is to destabilize the security institutions, to take control of the city." Luna, sitting next to Sarah, kept her blue eyes fixed on the captain, as if she understood every word. "But how does this connect to me and Rachel?" Sarah questioned, feeling a pang of pain as she remembered her partner still in critical condition. "You two were a threat," Thompson explained. "Your reputation for integrity and efficiency was hindering their plans. The attack at the industrial complex had two objectives: to eliminate you and plant false evidence, to tarnish the image of the department." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the gravity of the situation. When she opened them again, there was a fierce determination in her gaze. "What can we do, Captain? How can we stop this?" Thompson looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "That's where things get complicated, Mendez. Officially, you're off the case. In fact, there's an internal investigation into you and Davis." "What?" Sarah exclaimed, feeling a wave of indignation. Luna moved closer, as if sensing her owner's agitation. "Calm down," Thompson asked, raising his hand. "It's all part of their plan. They want to isolate you, destroy your credibility. But it's also our opportunity." Sarah frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "While you're officially off the case, you'll have the freedom to investigate behind the scenes," Thompson explained. "We have a small, trusted group working on this, but we need someone who can move in the shadows, someone they believe they've neutralized." Sarah's mind was already working, connecting the dots. "You want me to be a double agent?" Thompson nodded gravely. "It's dangerous, Mendez, very dangerous. But it might be our only chance to dismantle this organization before it's too late." Sarah looked at Luna, who returned the gaze with an almost supernatural intensity. It was as if the cat perfectly understood the gravity of the situation and was ready to face any challenge alongside her human. "I'm in," Sarah declared firmly, "but I'm going to need help and information." Thompson smiled slightly, for the first time since he had entered the room. "We already have a plan for that. As soon as you're discharged, we'll contact you through secure channels." He stood up, preparing to leave. "Mendez, what we're about to face, it's bigger than anything we've ever faced before. It's going to take everything we've got." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also a renewed determination. "I understand, Captain. I won't let you down." When Thompson left the room, Sarah found herself alone with Luna and her thoughts. The magnitude of the challenge ahead was daunting, but she knew she couldn't back down. "Looks like we have a big battle ahead of us, Luna," she murmured, stroking the cat's head. Luna purred in response, as if to say, "We're in this together." In the days that followed, as she recovered, Sarah used every available moment to plan her next steps. She knew that as soon as she left the hospital, she would be entering a world of shadows and dangers. Luna's daily visits became her anchor point, reminding her of what was at stake and why she fought. The cat's constant presence and unconditional love were like a beacon of hope amid the approaching storm. Finally, after 2 weeks of recovery, Sarah was discharged. As she left the hospital, she knew she was leaving behind more than just a convalescence bed. She was leaving behind the safety of her previous life and plunging into a world of uncertainties and dangers. With Luna secure in her arms, Sarah took a deep breath of the city air. Los Angeles, the metropolis she had sworn to protect, now seemed like an unknown battlefield. But she was ready to fight, not just for herself or for Rachel, but for everyone who called this city home. "Let's go, Luna," she whispered, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "We have a city to save." And so, Sarah Mendez took the first step in her new mission, with Luna as her faithful companion. The future was uncertain, the enemies were powerful, but the determination in her heart was unshakable. The battle for the soul of Los Angeles was just beginning. The days following Sarah's discharge from the hospital were a whirlwind of clandestine activities and meticulous planning. Her apartment, once a haven of tranquility, transformed into an improvised operations center. Maps of the city covered the walls, post-its with names and connections formed a complex web, and an encrypted laptop hummed constantly in the corner of the room. Luna, always alert, seemed to have assumed the role of sentinel, strategically positioning herself near the window or door, as if standing guard against invisible intruders. On the third night after her discharge, Sarah received an encoded message from Captain Thompson. It was time to take the next step. "Ready for a night walk, Luna?" Sarah asked, grabbing a dark jacket. The cat meowed in response, her blue eyes shining with an almost supernatural understanding. The streets of Los Angeles, normally busy even at night, seemed strangely quiet. Sarah walked with purpose, her senses on high alert. Luna followed closely, sometimes in front, sometimes behind, as if mapping the terrain. The destination was an old warehouse in the industrial district, seemingly abandoned, but which Captain Thompson had indicated as a safe meeting point. As she approached, Sarah noticed a familiar figure emerging from the shadows. "Mendez," Thompson's gruff voice greeted her. "I see you brought reinforcements," he added, noticing Luna. Sarah smiled slightly. "She's my partner now." Thompson nodded, understanding the depth of that statement. "Come, we have a lot to discuss and little time." Inside the warehouse, illuminated only by a few weak lamps, Sarah encountered a scene that surprised her. A small team of 5 people worked silently on computers and communication equipment. "This is our secret base of operations," Thompson explained. "Everyone here is absolutely trustworthy and committed to dismantling this criminal organization." Sarah was introduced to each team member: Maria, a cybersecurity specialist; Carl, a former intelligence agent; Rebecca, a prosecutor risking her career in this operation; David, an investigative journalist; and Dr. Andrews, a forensic pathologist who had noticed suspicious patterns in his autopsies. "And what's the plan?" Sarah asked, feeling the adrenaline rush through her veins. Maria took the lead, pointing to a series of screens. "We've identified a network of suspicious financial transactions linking various politicians and businessmen to Richard Carter's organization. Our goal is to trace these transactions to the source and expose the entire operation." "But it's not that simple," Carl interjected. "They have people infiltrated everywhere. Any wrong move and we could alert them." Sarah absorbed the information, her brain working rapidly. "And where do I fit into this?" Thompson approached, his face grave. "You, Mendez, will be our eyes and ears on the streets. Officially off duty, you can move without raising suspicion. We need you to collect information, make contacts, and help us put the pieces of this puzzle together." "And what about Rachel?" Sarah asked, the concern evident in her voice. Dr. Andrews answered, "She's out of danger, but still unconscious. I'm personally monitoring her case to ensure her safety." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Knowing that Rachel was safe gave her strength to move forward. "All right," she said, determination clear in her voice. "Where do we start?" The following hours were dedicated to intense planning. Sarah absorbed every detail, every name, every connection. Luna, surprisingly, remained attentive throughout the meeting, her blue eyes passing from one person to another, as if memorizing each face and voice. As the first ray of sunlight began to infiltrate through the cracks in the warehouse, Thompson ended the meeting. "Remember, from now on, each of you is on your own. Maintain contact only through the secure channels we've established. And above all, be careful." As she left the warehouse, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She looked at Luna, who walked confidently by her side. "Looks like it's us against the world now, partner." Luna meowed softly, as if to say, "We're ready for this." As they walked back home, the streets of Los Angeles were beginning to wake up. Early morning workers, delivery people, the first buses. The city Sarah had sworn to protect continued its routine, oblivious to the battle being waged in the shadows. Sarah knew that the days ahead would be the most challenging of her life. She would be walking the fine line between law and the underworld, relying only on her wit, her courage, and the unlikely but unshakable partnership with Luna. Upon arriving home, Sarah went straight to the map on the wall. With a red pen, she began to draw new lines, connecting dots that previously seemed disconnected. Luna jumped onto the table, closely observing every movement. "We're going to unravel this, Luna," Sarah murmured, more to herself than to the cat. "We're going to bring the truth to light, no matter what it takes." And so, with the rising sun illuminating Los Angeles, Sarah Mendez and her feline companion prepared to dive headfirst into the most dangerous mission of their lives. The battle for the soul of the city was just beginning, and they were determined to win. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Sarah and Luna. Days turned into nights, and nights into days, as they delved deeper and deeper into the web of corruption that enveloped Los Angeles. Sarah discovered that her connection with Luna went beyond a simple relationship between human and animal. The cat seemed to have a sixth sense for danger, alerting her with subtle meows or changes in behavior when something wasn't right. This unusual partnership saved Sarah's life more than once during her clandestine investigations. On a particularly tense night, Sarah found herself hidden in the back of an abandoned warehouse at the port, observing a suspicious meeting between corrupt politicians and members of organized crime. Luna, silent as a shadow, was by her side. "And we need these photos, Luna," Sarah whispered, adjusting her long-range camera. "It's the missing evidence to directly link the mayor to Richard's scheme." As Sarah photographed the incriminating scene, Luna suddenly tensed, her ears moving rapidly. Seconds later, Sarah heard footsteps approaching. "Damn it!" she muttered, quickly stowing the equipment. Luna was already in motion, guiding her to a safe escape route between stacked containers and boxes. They barely managed to escape, Sarah's heart pounding as they ran through the dark streets of the port. "Good girl, Luna," she panted, stroking the cat's head when they finally reached a safe location. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Back at the apartment, Sarah immediately sent the photos to the team through secure channels. The response was immediate. They finally had the key piece to dismantle the entire operation. The next day, the city woke up to bombshell news. Headlines screamed about the biggest corruption scandal in Los Angeles history. Politicians, businessmen, and organized crime figures were exposed, their illicit connections detailed in newspapers and newscasts. Sarah watched it all from her apartment, a mixture of relief and apprehension in her chest. Luna was by her side at the window, her blue eyes fixed on the city's horizon. "We did it, Luna," Sarah murmured. "But this isn't over yet." As if responding to her words, Sarah's phone rang. It was Captain Thompson. "Johnson, we need you now," his voice was urgent. "Richard Matthews has been located. He's cornered, but refuses to surrender. He's demanding to speak with you." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. "Where?" "In the same industrial complex where it all began," Thompson replied. "Be careful, Johnson. This could be a trap." Sarah looked at Luna, who was already alert, as if she had understood the conversation. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she responded, hanging up the phone. The journey to the industrial complex was tense. Sarah drove with determination, while Luna remained vigilant in the passenger seat. When they arrived, the place was surrounded by police cars and tactical teams. Sarah got out of the car, Luna following closely. Captain Thompson met her at the entrance to the complex. "He's in the central warehouse," Thompson informed. "Says he'll only surrender if he talks to you first. Are you sure you want to do this, Johnson?" Sarah nodded, her expression firm. "I have to finish what we started, Captain." "Your cat can't go in," one of the tactical officers warned. Sarah looked at Luna, who returned the gaze with an almost human intensity. "She stays with me," Sarah declared, her voice leaving no room for argument. As she entered the warehouse, Sarah felt the weight of the situation. Richard Matthews was in the center, surrounded by abandoned boxes and machinery. His eyes shone with a mixture of anger and resignation. "Officer Johnson," he greeted, a bitter smile on his lips. "Or should I say, the heroine of Los Angeles?" "It's over, Richard," Sarah responded, keeping her distance. Luna positioned herself protectively by her side. "You've lost." Richard laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "Lost? Maybe. But at what cost to you, Sarah? How many lives were destroyed in this process? How many dirty secrets did you have to unearth?" Sarah felt the weight of his words, remembering all the shocking revelations she had uncovered during the investigation. "It was necessary," she responded firmly, "to clean up this city." "Clean up?" Richard mocked. "Do you really believe that? No matter how many of us you arrest, there will always be others to take our place. Corruption is part of this city, just like concrete and asphalt." Luna growled softly, as if she understood and disagreed with Richard's words. Sarah took a step forward, her voice filled with conviction. "You're wrong, Richard. As long as there are people willing to fight for what's right, there's hope. And I will never stop fighting." For a moment, silence reigned in the warehouse. Richard looked from Sarah to Luna, a flash of something, perhaps respect, perhaps resignation, passing through his eyes. "You know, Sarah," he said finally, "in another world, under different circumstances, we could have been allies. We're more alike than you'd like to admit." Sarah shook her head. "The difference is that I chose the right path, Richard. And it's not too late for you to do the same." With a heavy sigh, Richard extended his hands. "Very well, Officer Johnson. You've won, for now." As the tactical teams entered to make the arrest, Sarah felt a mix of emotions, relief, exhaustion, but also a renewed determination. She looked at Luna, who returned the gaze with unwavering confidence. Leaving the warehouse with the rising sun on the Los Angeles horizon, Sarah knew that this wasn't the end, but just the beginning of a new battle. The city was wounded, exposed, but also with a chance for healing and renewal. "Let's go home, Luna," she murmured, stroking the head of her faithful companion. "We have a lot of work ahead of us." And so Sarah Johnson and Luna, the unlikely duo that had unraveled the biggest conspiracy in Los Angeles history, walked together towards the future, ready to face any challenge the city might present them. End of story.